It was the summer of 2023 when my wife, Emma, and I moved into a Victorian-era townhouse in Haworth, a sleepy little village in West Yorkshire. The place had stood abandoned for decades, its previous owner, an elderly woman named Margaret Whitaker, having died with no known relatives. To us, it was a dream restoration project. The kind of house you see in films, where every corner oozes character and a little dust. We spent the first few weeks sorting through years of neglect, peeling back layers of wallpaper, airing out the rooms, scrubbing away the grime. It wasn't until we ventured into the attic that things began to shift from quaint to unsettling. Tucked in the far corner beneath cobwebs and an old tarpaulin was a dusty, heavy trunk. Inside, amongst moth-eaten clothes and rusted trinkets, sat a porcelain doll. She was about 2 feet tall, dressed in a tattered blue gown with lace trim. Her glass eyes seemed too clear, like they were still watching. Around her wrist, a yellowing tag dangled on a piece of twine. Her name is Eliza. She keeps the secrets safe. I chuckled and showed Emma. She laughed nervously and said the doll was too creepy to be thrown away. She cleaned it up and placed it on a high shelf in our bedroom. I wasn't keen on it, but I let it go. Not long after we brought Eliza into our room, I started noticing odd things. At night, there were soft tapping sounds from the ceiling above, like someone pacing in the attic. The doors creaked open on their own, even when the windows were shut. At first, I blamed old wood and bad insulation, rational stuff. But then I started waking up at odd hours, feeling cold. Emma would have these bizarre nightmares dreams of a girl crying in a dim room, begging someone to listen. One night, I woke up to find her standing at the foot of the bed, staring at the doll. She didn't remember any of it. Things escalated. I started finding things moved. My keys, once left on the kitchen counter, would be in the bathroom. The doll, which faced the window, would sometimes face the bed. It started to feel like we weren't alone in that house. I decided to do some digging. The village library had archives on the Whitaker family. Turns out, Margaret had a younger sister named Eliza, who vanished in 1953. She was 10 years old. The case went cold. No leads, no body, just gone. Emma and I invited a local historian, Dr. Helen Morrison, to visit the house. She specialized in Haworth's past and had written a few books on unsolved local mysteries. When she saw the doll, her face went pale. She said it matched the time period exactly and believed it might have belonged to Eliza herself. She suggested we search the attic thoroughly. We did. After hours of knocking and tapping, I found a hollow spot beneath the old floorboards. I pried up a plank and found a metal box. Inside, a diary, letters, and a black and white photo of 2 young girls. One of them held the doll. Margaret's diary chilled me. In between pages about school and chores were confessions, jealousy, rage, and then I couldn't take it anymore. The way they adored her. I didn't mean to push her that hard, but she hit her head. She stopped moving. I hid her in the attic. Eliza will keep the secret safe. I read it aloud to Emma. She turned white. We called the police. A forensic team arrived and began excavation in the attic. They found skeletal remains, tiny and fragile, wrapped in an old bedsheet beneath the floorboards. DNA confirmed it was Eliza. The story exploded in the media. Reporters camped outside our house for days. Experts compared it to other real-life unsolved family tragedies. Margaret had lived her whole life with that secret. After Eliza's remains were given a proper burial, the odd happenings stopped. The house felt lighter. Emma donated the doll to the local museum. They placed it behind glass with a plaque, explaining the story. People said they felt uneasy around it, but there were no further incidents. We finished renovating the house. Life slowly returned to normal. But the story didn't end there. A few months later, I was organizing old photographs for a local history project. One stuck out. It showed 2 girls standing in a garden. One of them held the doll. On the back, in neat handwriting. To my dearest Margaret, may she always keep your secrets safe. Love, Eliza. My blood ran cold. What if Margaret wasn't the killer? What if Eliza, in a jealous rage, harmed her sister and assumed her identity? Maybe the guilt warped her memories. Maybe the diary was her way of coping with what she'd done. We'd never know the truth. But one thing was certain. The doll Eliza had kept the secret, just like she promised. I've been a collector of antique oddities for nearly 15 years. Not the usual porcelain plates or faded books. My passion lies in the unusual. Prosthetics from the 1800s, medical tools, mourning jewelry, anything that once belonged to someone long gone and carried a story with it. In September 2022, I came across an estate sale in Norwich, listed online. A reclusive man named Lionel Clark had passed away. He was an eccentric, apparently, and his home was rumored to be a hoarder's paradise. Naturally, I was intrigued. Among the debris of dusty frames, tarnished cutlery, and cracked mirrors, I spotted her. A doll, unlike any I'd seen before. Leather-skinned, glass-eyed, and wearing a delicate red velvet dress, about 16 inches tall, with jointed limbs and individually carved teeth. Most collectors would have turned away at how eerie she looked, but I felt drawn in. There was no price tag. The executor of the estate, a weary-looking solicitor, gave it to me for free. He never let anyone touch that thing, he muttered. Said it was a family heirloom from France, locked it in a cabinet with chains. I laughed, tucked the doll under my arm, and drove home. Back at my shop, I displayed her on the center shelf. I named her Margot. Customers were instantly captivated, though few stayed near her for long. They'd glance, frown, and move away. One man even asked if she was taxidermy. Things started to shift the week after Margot arrived. I misplaced items constantly. A silver spoon turned up inside a shoe. A vintage ring was found submerged in the shop's toilet. A customer claimed Margot's head turned while they were browsing. I dismissed it all. Then came the theft. My CCTV picked up nothing, but 3 items vanished overnight: an 1860s brooch, a child's mourning photograph, and a locket. The next morning, they were sitting on the floor in front of Margot's shelf. I started closing up early. Something about the silence around her after dark gave me the chills. I even dreamt about her. Once, I woke up to the sound of tiny footsteps in the hallway of my flat above the shop. Nothing was there. I contacted a fellow collector in Lyon, France, who had a knack for tracing provenance. He found a disturbing article from 1892 involving a family named Dufour. Their daughter, Margot, had died at age 9 under mysterious circumstances. Her father, a doll maker, was accused of trying to preserve her soul in a handmade creation. The town branded him insane. The doll was said to be buried with him after his suicide. So how did it end up in Lionel Clark's collection? I dug deeper. Clark had spent time in France in the 80s, buying up local estate lots. It's possible he came across the doll unknowingly, or maybe he knew exactly what it was. One night, I was woken by the sound of glass breaking. I rushed downstairs to find the shop's front window shattered. Nothing was stolen, but Margot was missing. The police were baffled. They found no fingerprints, no sign of entry aside from the window. Then, a week later, I got a parcel. Inside was Margot. No note, no explanation. Just the doll, wrapped in red velvet and tied with twine. I gave her to a storage facility the next day, locking her in a climate-controlled unit far from the shop. My nerves began to settle. Months passed. The shop thrived again. I felt lighter, more focused. I was even planning a podcast to share my stories. Then I got a call. The storage unit had been broken into. Nothing was taken except the doll. Later that week, an elderly customer came into the shop. She froze when she saw a photo of Margot I'd left on my desk. "You kept her?" she asked. I explained the whole story. She stared at me with watery eyes. "My sister had that doll. She vanished in 1955. Police found the doll in her bed, but no trace of her. My mother destroyed it." "Are you sure?" I asked, feeling cold. She nodded. "That thing comes back, no matter who owns it. It's not cursed, it's looking." I tried to laugh it off, but when I returned home that night, I found something on my pillow. A single red velvet thread. Margot had returned, and this time, I don't think she's leaving. Not until she finds what she's looking for. I've worked in law enforcement for 19 years, most of it in CID. I specialize in cold cases, those long-forgotten files with faded photographs and incomplete statements. The kind of work that's as much patience as it is detective instinct. In October 2021, I was assigned a reopened file out of Devon, a missing child case from 1998. Name, Lucy Harris, age 6. Last seen playing in the front garden while her mother took a call. She vanished without a trace. The case went cold despite dozens of interviews and extensive searches. The box of evidence was sparse. A few black and white prints, a taped interview transcript, and a small plastic evidence bag containing a doll. Handmade, woolen limbs, button eyes. Worn, but cared for. It was noted as Lucy's comfort object. Found under a hedge days after she went missing. I took the box back to my flat for the weekend, something I only do with cases that refuse to leave my head. I started by reviewing the family's interviews. Nothing jumped out, except that the doll was never seen again after the initial search. No one remembered who bagged it or logged it. Odd, but not unheard of. Then I got a tip. A retired constable who'd worked the original case said something strange. Another child, same age, similar doll, disappeared in 2002, 10 miles away. I dug through the archives. He was right. The girl's name was Emily Thorpe. Her doll had also been recovered identical in design, right down to the stitching pattern on the legs. No connection had ever been drawn between the two cases. Different towns, different times, different investigating teams. Over the next month, I found 3 more case stow in Somerset, 1 in Hampshire. All involved young girls aged 5 to 7. All were listed as disappearances with no resolution, and all had one thing in common: a handmade doll found nearby. I contacted a textile analyst. He confirmed the material and stitching style were consistent. More importantly, the wool fibers used in each doll were from the same regional supplier and obscure mill in Dorset that closed in 1995. This wasn't coincidence. Someone was making these dolls, and had been for decades. I tracked down the owner of the old wool mill. He barely remembered much, but gave me the name of a man who used to bulk buy their waste yarn for personal projects: Kenneth Whitaker. The name wasn't in any criminal database, but he'd lived a quiet life in a cottage near Yeovil. No spouse, no children. Died in 2017. I visited his property now, owned by the council, left derelict. Inside, it was a time capsule. Yellowed wallpaper, vintage furniture, and hundreds of dolls. On shelves, hanging from the ceiling, some inside glass cabinets, all the same make as Lucy's. Each doll had a number written on the back of its head. Some were higher than others, up to 47. I contacted the forensic team. They ran DNA tests on fibers, and one doll had faint traces of blood. It matched the profile of Emily Thorpe. We'll never know the full truth. Whitaker had no known criminal record, no history of violence, but something about his life suggests he operated beneath the radar. We suspect he abducted the girls, kept them for a time, and disposed of them. The dolls weren't keepsakes, they were trophies. Each one marked a child. We only identified 5, but there were 47 dolls in that house. I've closed the case file, but Lucy's doll, the one I brought home that first weekend, it's in an evidence locker now. Every time I see it, I think about how close we came to never uncovering this. how evil doesn't always come with ghosts or whispers or haunted rooms. Sometimes it just comes in the form of an old man with a hobby and a needle and thread. I'm an antiques dealer, been one for just over a decade now, mostly handling estate sales and old family possessions people can't be bothered to keep. You wouldn't believe the strange things people hoard. Last June, I attended a clearance auction in a small village outside Brighton, a retired watchmaker's estate. Most of it was junk water-damaged clocks, rusted tools. But there was one item that stood out, a wooden display case with a hand-stitched doll inside. The tag read, "Victorian, unique." I'm no doll expert, but the craftsmanship was too good to ignore. Real horsehair, glass eyes, delicate embroidered clothing. I won the bid at just under £200. Didn't think much of it, just another quirky piece for the shop. Back at my shop in Croydon, I placed the doll in the window. Customers asked about it constantly, which was a good sign. But then I noticed something odd. People would spend minutes staring at it, then walk away unsettled. One older woman, clearly shaken, said she'd seen the exact same doll as a child in her neighbor's home. It had belonged to a girl who died in an accident. She couldn't remember the name, but she swore the face was identical. Curious, I started researching similar dolls online. I found a collector's forum. After posting photos, I got a message from a man in Liverpool. He had one just like it. Said it was made by a woman named Agnes Bell, a seamstress who custom-made dolls for affluent families in the early 1900s. Here's the kicker. Every doll she made had a name stitched on the inside of the dress lining. I checked mine. In faded red thread it read, "Clara." That's when things started to spiral. The Liverpool collector told me his doll was linked to a girl who vanished from her home in 1924. No body ever found, just a doll left behind. I found 2 more owners through the forum. Same doll design, same name stitched inside Clara, all connected to unexplained disappearances of girls between 1910 and 1930. Always girls aged 6 to 8, always from southern England. I contacted a local historian who specialized in Victorian social history. She confirmed Agnes Bell lived in Sussex until 1932, then vanished from records. No death certificate, no obituary. She simply disappeared. I traced the doll's provenance. Before the watchmaker's estate, it belonged to his wife's family. They acquired it during a church sale in 1956, but no one knew where it came from before that. I started documenting everything. Photos, letters from collectors, the stitching detail. I compiled it into a blog post. That's when a journalist from a true crime podcast reached out. She'd heard of the Clara doll from a retired detective who'd linked it to a 1972 missing child case, a girl named Megan. She disappeared from a park in Eastbourne. Her mother swore Megan had found an old doll on a bench the day before. They never recovered Megan. But photos from the police file show the doll in her room. Same dress, same hair, same face. This wasn't about ghosts or curses. The real horror was how one object could be silently passed down through generations, linked to tragedy after tragedy, without anyone noticing. I contacted the police with everything I had. They were skeptical, but agreed to hold the doll as part of an unofficial review. They sent it to a lab for fiber and trace testing. The results? Traces of arsenic in the fabric. Harmless now, but at the time enough to cause illness if handled frequently. Dolls weren't regulated in the early 1900s. It's possible these toys were laced with low doses of toxins, whether intentionally or through contaminated materials. We'll never know if Agnes Bell meant harm, but her dolls may have been silent killers creeping through history, household by household. I no longer keep antiques at home, and I never trust anything with a stitched smile.